welcome everybody to another installation of the Advanced Work Packaging Conference free webinar series. I'm going to go ahead and maximize the slide view for you. So this is, as I mentioned, another installation of our webinar series. For those of you who are familiar with the series, it is an opportunity to give industry preview of the AWP conference content and an opportunity as well to kind of get to know our panelists and presenters and ask them any AWP related questions you may have leading into the conference. This presentation today is on the topic of measuring AWP success, and we'll just get going. First of all, I'll give a quick background to anyone who may not be familiar with the AWP conference. This conference started out in 2009 in Calgary, Alberta, as the Workplace Planning Conference, as a part of the Construction Owners Association of Alberta's workplace planning model, which was expanded through a joint initiative with the Construction Industry Institute between 2011 and 2013, and was relaunched as the Advanced Work Packaging model, which covered a wider spectrum of detail in the overall project life cycle, and is the AWP model that you know now. The conference itself came to Houston for the first time in 2014 and has returned every year since, and it's grown every year since, and we're proud to introduce probably our best and deepest program this year. So we're looking forward to seeing everyone down there and hearing what all of our panelists and presenters have to say. Next year, the conference will take another big leap as we go to London, England, and also bring the conference back to Alberta for the first time since 2014. So, and that's on top of running the Houston conference annually as well. So you can look forward to 3 different AWP conferences in 2019. Finally, in 2017, we introduced an AWP conference advisory committee. The gentlemen you'll hear from today are members of that committee, and that committee has been working very hard to help us develop the program, as well as develop the conference themes and the format, and we thank them for their efforts so far. We will continue that effort into 2019 as well for all of our conferences. The conference theme, well, actually, the conference theme is developing an AWP organization. What's your AWP playbook? So we'll be asking the question, what is your playbook, and how does that contribute to turning your organization into an AWP-centric organization? And one of the topics that we're focusing on here today is measuring AWP success that contributes to the overall theme. As you can see, the topics that we're presenting on the main stage this year that will help us explore that conference theme. We're going to be giving our annual CII and COA update to learn more about developments and the best practices and the research and development around that. We're going to be talking about AWP scalability, how to apply AWP to a greater variety of project types, and in particular to projects valued at $100 million and under. Cultural change, how to make the shift organizational wide from whatever you're doing now to whatever it takes to make AWP work. AWP technologies, so that's software and hardware that support AWP and enhance AWP activities on the projects. Procurement, tips for making your procurement and materials efforts work in an AWP environment. And then what we're talking about today, measuring AWP success, how to make sure things are working, what's going well, what's not going so well, and overall creating your AWP playbook. So how do you put all the pieces together and start to implement successfully? The panelists that will be on the main stage at the conference are Chris Tisdale from Ruckus Innovation Consulting, Mark Lambert from Eastman Chemical, Jay Moser from Shell, Martin Swain from Shell, and Antonio Montero from Jacobs. And Unfortunately, Chris, Mark, and Jay were all pulled away on for different responsibilities, and regret that they couldn't be here on this webinar today. However, you will get a chance to meet them, hear from them, and talk to them at the conference this year in their presentations. So today we're joined by Martin Swain from Shell and Antonio Montero from Jacobs. Again, as I've mentioned multiple times here, the topic that they have been working hard on and will be presenting at the conference is measuring AWP success. You can find that on October 3rd, that's day 2 of the conference, on the main stage from 4 to 5 p.m. So they'll be closing the conference down for us. You can find a full description of that, timing for that, as well as a bunch more information on awpconference.com. So we encourage you to check that out. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Antonio to start us out with today's webinar.
Hi, my name is the General Manager for Technology and Solutions for Jacobs Construction Maintenance. Share some of the perspectives that Jacobs has through our AWP journey on the measuring of AWP success. So starting point is how we measure AWP success, and that is a very relative question that's going to vary a little bit depending on every company's chosen path of AWP and how far you are from the implementation. So through the formal presentation, what we're going to showcase and provide input is, if you consider how you measure through the project life cycle, the phase of AWP. Starting out with engineering design, how do you measure that, the outputs, and then going next into detailed design phase, where you're really focusing on EWPs and PWPs, or what are the perspectives of making sure you're accomplishing your AWP goals and implementing it successfully. And then finally into the construction phase, where you're going heavily into the IWP portion and measuring the whole IWP perspective, the whole AWP implementation through construction.
I apologize to interrupt Antonio, but I've got a few messages from attendees that your audio is breaking up a little bit. I'm not sure if there's maybe an issue with the hardware or your network connection. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Let me know if it still continues or if it gets better.
Okay.
We'll also be touching on engineering versus procurement and versus construction, because there are different perspectives on what need to be measured in an AWP implementation. And a lot of those validate the checks and balances that are necessary for full integrity of the system and then the transition points of that system, especially about the different requirements that will be driven just by the packaging systems. EWPs are a bit different than, obviously different from IWPs. And that we'll also touch is the differences in measuring a program versus a project basis. Project basis is very centric on individual performance of the different package levels and how those are performance against the whole scope. The program then gives of embedment and maturity of AWP and how well your organization is adopting and evolving through the AWP roadmaps. Some different maturity perspective slides and how that whole journey accomplished to drive the optimal AWP implementation. Next, I'll hand it over to Martin from Shell, and he'll describe Shell's perspective.
Thank you, Antonio. So yes, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending where you are in the world. Martin Swain. My role in Shell is the 4D, 5D Global Delivery Manager. we don't really have an AWP program, so I'm as close as it is. I work with Jay Moser, who is what we call the PTE for construction. So he's the project technical expert for construction in Shell. Just a little bit of brief about myself. So previously from the global delivery, I ran the program for 4D, which started back in 2013 when it seemed a good idea. One of the big drivers, if people know Shell and work with Shell, they know about Project Vantage. We kind of joined Project Vantage in about 2015, 2016. But one of the things we learned there was we kind of thought when we were trying to specify technology that people understood the process, and we were just adopting the then workplace planning process. We'd done our research, etc., from COA and CII. The pilots that we then ran between, say, 2013 through to last year showed that where the contractors really understood AWP, we were seeing good results, and where maybe they weren't so educated, I should say, in the process, we were sort of seeing mixed results. So clearly we've, in the concept of being agile, is learned from that, and in the next round of projects, really starting from this year and into next year, really started a more formal education program for our own people and for asking questions during bid on AWP, because now we kind of really believe in that process, people process technology pieces. The technology is out there, it kind of works, it could be better, to be honest, but we know that if the process and the people understand the process, we're seeing good results, and it's not technology dependent, it's actually a competency and a process. I would say, so there was a good slide there of Antonio, so this is about how we measure success. So as I just said, more process and technology, mixed results there. Clear steer on next deployments. We are writing a lot about AWP in our contracts, and also about, as I mentioned there, about competencies as far as making sure people are accredited. I think we need to go back to a bit more of an accredited system in some of these kind of new tools and our old more designer tools, and also this greater understanding of data workflow. And in the face-to-face conference, we'll talk about the data workflow slightly. We've certainly done a lot more work on that space. But if I was just to focus on the how do we measure success, or why do we measure success in what areas, I think a lot of this, if I look at those kind of three key areas, so in the feed, we're really looking for our contractors to make sure they're using AWP to split the job up. So I should be able to see the CWAs being reported. I should be able to see the broken down into CWP by the end of feed. So there is as they go through that constructability process, they are thinking about how they're adding the code both to our schedules and to our 3D models. So we can build that 4D model for planning and simulation, etc., so we can really understand it. But what we've found is that if that code is in there in feed, it really pays dividends in the next piece, which is obviously detailed design execution. One of our projects currently running with one of the major contractors of the world put the CWP code against everything. So it's now actually almost a common currency between a lot of data sets. So from engineering to procurement to materials management to track and trace systems, i.e. the barcoding and RFIDs, that code appears as an attribute against the tag number or against the PO, and it's really paid dividends that allows us to search with our contractor on how we're performing. So as we go into that, so we finish detailed design, it's all really about, okay, so I'm really looking at where AWP helps us is that we can see that all the CWPs are allocated to purchase orders and we haven't missed anything, and then we move into construction with 90-day look ahead with IWPs created at that stage, and we can actually see a lot more effectively. And what we see actually truly in construction on our next project that's really taking it to the next stage is that our contractor there has really driven a reporting mechanism using Power BI, to then report on those IWPs, the CWPs, and we know how many IWPs we expect to be created, and how many have been created. We know, and then we also know how many are actually to go. So we now starting to see very different data sets, and giving us, the client, more confidence on how the contractor is performing through that AWP process. And I shall pause there.
Okay, great. Thank you, Martin. I really appreciate that detailed look. As you can see, there's going to be a lot of information coming at you at the conference, but over 2 days of conference time, you'll have an opportunity for sure to catch up with all of these presenters and ask them your questions. And there will be, of course, viewpoints from Jay Moser from Shell, as Martin mentioned, as well as from Eastman Chemical, and Chris Tisdale from Ruckus Innovation Consulting will be facilitating that session. So lots of different points of view that you'll be treated to there. So we're going to move into the Q&A period. We have a couple of questions built in, and we'll present those to our panelists now. And while we're getting their responses, do some thinking about what questions you might have for them now, and feel free to submit those through the chat window, and we'll address those after we get through these first two. So let's start here. How do you? We'll actually start with Antonio from Jacobs. How do you measure success for procurement and material management in an AWP execution?
So the measure of the AWP or in the procurement and material management process is extremely important in the AWP ecosystem, because it's the final transition of all the planning elements coming into construction to validate the true ability to have everything ready to have the optimal productivity in the field. We found that the final measurement that's most successful is the validation of material availability and delivery. And we've kind of drawn a black and white line to simply say we need to validate that 100% of the material is there, regardless of source of the material, regardless if it's owner purchased, regardless if it's contractor purchased, field purchased, home office purchased, irrelevant. The ultimate ideal is by the time you want to get started, that superintendent that's going to be doing the work doesn't care the source of the material. He just cares that he has the material to be able to start and be productive. So as far as a measurement perspective, the final measurement of true validation is the delivery of all the material, but we also maintain metrics to confirm that the material is moving through the supply cycle, going through the requisitioning process, the purchasing process, and then ultimately into delivery process. But it's a very important metric to maintain and make sure that it's being managed properly.
Okay, great. And Martin, how would you respond to this question? I think you may be muted, Martin.
I am sorry, I am mute. I was going to say, thanks, no problem. That was a great response by Antonio. So I fully concur with Antonio. So where in our experience on, and you'll hear about this on the live session on Geismar, procurement was critical to us. It's one of the key things. The creation of the IWPs and linking it to our material management systems with our construction contractor, in that case Turner, really was a bit of a game changer in our space. It goes back to, I was kind of semi-answering this question earlier actually. So for us, at the higher level, it's looking at the CWPs are allocated when we run reports that are all allocated to material, and we haven't got any material that doesn't seem to be allocated to a CWP. That means when it hits the laydown areas, they can be then be subdivided. First of all, hopefully can be starting to be shipped by CWP, but equally when the IWPs have been created, they can be then put in a laydown area by IWPs, and they can be trucked up to site, especially when I'm thinking about one of our sites at the moment. So a lot more organization, and that really makes, I suppose, the rubber hits the road in the whole of AWP, is that the craft can get the right materials in the right sequence in an efficient manner, and they can get they can get on with their job. And if you achieve that, then I think AWP is kind of where the triangle really meets, and that's when you get the productivity that obviously that we would like to see and we believe is actually there. You can do lots of things, clever things with technology and drawings, etc. But if you can't get materials to the right place at the right time to the right people, that's it will go wrong at that point. So that's where I really see that AWP. We can measure that. We can measure the progress of how we're achieving that. I think we'll only get stronger, as I said, with Power BI, and it allows us not to. I think in the past sometimes it's point the finger, sort of like play the criticize, etc. as the owner, but it's like we're all on a journey. We are all learning, and it's a real case of okay, let's look at the analytics together. Let's look at where the gaps are. Let's try and now fix that gap and improve that process. That's the I would like to believe is the next stage of evolution of working with our contractors to improve the whole process.
Excellent response from both Antonio and Martin. Question 2, are there differences in the measure of AWP success between owners and contractors? And I suppose if so, what are those? Antonio, do you want to start us out again?
Sure. So there are some potential differences in the measure of success between an owner and a contractor. And some of these differences sometimes are driven by the contractual models that are derived or implemented on projects. So as an example, projects where EP are broken out into one contract versus C as a separate contract, depending on how that arrangement is made and the terms and conditions, and especially depending on that C contract for construction, if it's a lump sum, reimbursable, etc., it can drive some potential opposing behaviors of the measure of success based on the commercial incentives that the contractor might be seeking. So it's something that has to be thought out, and when clients are planning the overall architecture of an AWP implementation, how they're going to be able to manage some of those potential expectations and inherent frictions that are kind of developed based on some commercial terms. The contractors obviously have the same goal as any other company out there. They need to maximize their profit as much as possible while delivering what was agreed upon per the contract terms. So based on that, a simple incentive and commercial perspective, again, there's opportunities for differing goals or different measures of what the true success is in AWP. Overall, obviously, I don't think there's any major argument that some of the core metrics of measure are going to be equal. In other words, safety is going to be universal. Quality is going to be universal. Schedule-wise and cost-wise, that's where, again, you have some potentials for differences. But mainly cost, even there's a good alignment between contractor base and client base.
Great, and Martin. Yeah, another great response there from Antonio. So I know I'm going to follow that one. So let me have a look. Differences. So I would say from owner point of view, we're looking at, are we collectively meeting schedule? And that's what we're looking at, the kind of like the AWP data to feed up to that line of saying, okay, yes, we know the sequence of IWPs and CWPs, etc., and we're working in the right sequence as per the original constructability design, and we're on schedule. That drives a better safety culture that we know from experience that the minute we get into hero status, just getting after anything we can get after, then it immediately starts the culture of higher safety risk, rework, etc., just because we're trying to keep everyone busy. So it's a great measure for us. I believe it's going to be. I mean, we're starting to see those signs, but as I said, we're all on that journey together. So I believe it's going to be an even better measure for us of are we doing the right things in the right order. from the contractor point of view, I mean, you hit on a great point. I see now a lot of contracts where there's an E&P and then a separate C. So therefore, the owners may be playing broker in the middle of that, and that does create different behaviours from everybody. And we all have to understand, everyone's in this business to, turn a profit, etc. So it's how that data is passed across by the E&P, so it can make the C successful. And I think AWP can play and will play a significant part in that. At the C, down at the C level, the construction contractor level, is can he actually get on with the work according to his schedule? So, or is engineering late in certain areas, or procurement late in certain areas, which is hindering construction? I think that gives the owner a far better insight into how things are progressing compared to where we've been before. And I see, as I said, I kind of bang on about Power BI, but this kind of real-time reporting that this kind of gives us the information, it will replace that 50-page monthly report, which is difficult then to analyze. We really want to be able to see that in real time about how we're progressing, so we can then collectively deal with any issues together, especially in that EP plus C model that we may be encountering. Stephen.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Before we move on to attendee Q&A, just want to remind everybody, AWP Conference is October 2nd and 3rd, so we're just a few weeks away now. It's down in Houston, Texas at the JW Marriott at the Houston Galleria location. Again, you can find Measuring AWP Success as part of our plenary program. We have 7 great presentations on the main stage over 2 days. And this particular presentation will be on day 2, October 3rd at 4:00 p.m. to close the conference out for us. AWPconference.com has all the information you need. It's being updated constantly with new information as it comes in. We have 20 breakout sessions for you, as well as our 7 plenary presentations. And you can reserve a table for your team or register as an individual to attend the conference this year. And we hope that you do that. And we look forward to seeing you down there in Houston again this year. So what I'll do now is I'll actually stop the screen share and we'll move on to attendee Q&A for our panelists. So one moment, I'm just reviewing a question here. So now this might actually be a question better suited to next week's webinar, which is based around the plenary presentation, AWP procurement in an AWP environment. But while we're here, let's propose this to our panelists anyway, to see what their take is. The question is, the new approach is to name PWP as procurement work process rather than procurement work package. What is the main reason for this change, considering the implementation experience and lessons learned? And I think that this change is mostly coming out of the Construction Owners Association of Alberta, but I'm not sure what CII's position is on this currently. What do the panelists think? Maybe we'll start with Antonio.
Okay, so that change, honestly, I'm more of a major proponent to keep the nomenclature as a procurement work package, because I think the procurement arm deserves an equal seat at the table as far as the packaging element. Plus, it is such a big driver to the overall success of AWP that it can really make or break any AWP implementation. We've experienced through some of our executions some great work on EWPs, great work on work phase planning and the IWP component, but all it takes is some hiccups in that procurement work process for the whole AWP program to suffer significantly. So I think there is, again, some different thoughts process within the industry of the nomenclature. The procurement or the Jacobs perspective is We believe it's a procurement work package because of its significance in the AWP ecosystem. It is a more relevant perspective.
Okay, Martin, what's your take on this one?
Well, I agree completely. So a procurement work package to me is the list of materials that go with that IWP, or it rolls up to that CWP. I can collate that data together and call it that's procurement stuff. I would slightly worry about when you call it a procurement work process, in the order that I start taking a significant step back, and then my procurement isn't aligned to the work package. The only caveat to that is, certainly on a current project, that they kind of really did take procurement work package too literally, and materials were ordered in that kind of PWP kind of concept. And I would actually say, well, you have to have a degree of, you have to optimize procurement first and foremost. So there's no, but it has to be efficiently linked to those PWP concept, because I think that is fundamental to everything, as Antonio was saying.
Great. Yeah, I've personally heard this topic come up multiple times in the past year, and it's definitely an indication that procurement is an area of growing interest around advanced work packaging, and the definition of a PWP is something that will be talked about in great detail, I'm sure, at the conference, both among smaller groups and on the main stage as well. So appreciate that question. Thank you so much. And definitely sign up for next week's webinar on procurement. That's on Wednesday, September 19th. That one will be focused on this conversation. Here's another question. Are there any differences in the measure of AWP success between lump sum contracts and time and materials contracts? Let's start with Martin this time.
Yes, I saw that. I was flicking through the chat box, and I saw that actually. This is like a big question, okay? Because obviously lots of owners like lump sum contracts. They like the concept of hands off. Let the EPC get on with it, which is great. That's ultimately what we want. We want them to do it safely and efficiently. I think those two very much go together with a high level of quality. And then I get colleagues that tell me, if I'm talking in the open, it's like, well, if it's lump sum, we don't care. They'll give us the keys at the end of it, and we're all happy. But if you look at that historically, that isn't how lump sum works. It is complicated. Either the design isn't mature enough, which then causes a problem. They go into construction too early. There's issues, there's change requests, etc. So I haven't got the answer with it. I believe that I would like to see the contractors deploy AWP in a lump sum environment, so they become more efficient. If they become more efficient, then obviously their margin gets better. I mean, that's my driver for a wish. In reimbursable, on the flip side, obviously, it's our dollar that's at stake, and we're there to protect not just our dollar. If you actually look at most capital projects, it's a collection of owners with one owner sort of managing on their behalf, so stakeholders. So we're there protecting their money. And we need to do it as efficient as possible. So maybe in a reimbursable, we've got to drive it a little bit harder to make sure that we lower the risk and protect the money and protect the schedule. In lump sum, I can see that, for companies that get really good at this, and there's a few out there that are really taking up this now, it's going to increase their margin. And if it increases their margin, but we get that delivered on a high quality product, delivered safely, on target, on schedule, and meets the operating requirements that we have thereafter, I think it's a win-win for everybody.
Excellent. And Antonio, your thoughts?
Great answer by Martin, and I resonate quite a few things that he referenced as well. Inherently, it's again the motivators and the drivers of each one of those different parties against these contractual terms that's going to make more significant some of these KPIs for measure of success. So just like Martin said, in a lump sum environment, the drive is to maximize profitability within that, and obviously within the terms of the contract, the deliverables. But the sheer maximization of that profitability is the key core thing that's going to drive a lot of the behaviors. In a reimbursable environment, again, that one starts becoming a little bit different because the risk allocation profile is changed, and the financial risk is now either primarily by the owner or shared between both parties, depending on the exact terms of the contract. So in that case, obviously the owner is still going to be heavily inclined to be looking at that performance perspective, but the incentive of the contractor will always remain in some additional reductions in schedule duration, indirect improvements, and other items that might still drive the overall financial benefits of the project. So again, it significantly is determined by the terms of the contracts and how those alignments of metrics and risk allocations get placed in. But there are some measurements that will be always universal regardless of the contract terms. Safety will always be a core metric that will be always agreed upon by all parties. Same thing on quality. And schedule, again, for most part, that will always be a core metric as well.
Awesome. So we are at 9:40. I think we said we wouldn't run longer than 45 minutes, and I should say 10:40, or depending on where you are in the world. Based on Houston time, it's 10:40. So we have one more question here, and then we should wrap it up to get everybody back to work. But the question is, what information should you add to P6 to link up to the AWP process? Maybe Antonio, did you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. So we've done the incorporation into P6. We've added a couple different methods of incorporating AWP into it. We start out as far as our WBS structure, our work breakdown structure, is aligned to the packaging and hierarchy levels of our packaging systems, starting from a CWA, then to EWP/PWP/CWP level, and then the sub-hierarchy level going down into the IWP later on. But then beyond that, we've implemented identification of discrete either EWP activities or milestone perspectives. It really depends on the complexity of the logic of the schedule. But the core gist is that there's a reference to the package number at a EWP, PWP, and CWP level, and also at an IWP level, directly embedded into the description component of our activities inside P6.
Thanks, Antonio. Martin?
Yeah, well, that's great to hear, actually. So yes, I would say, when I first started this, I had a lot of pushback from the planning community within Shell, thinking that we were going to basically disrupt our whole WBS code system. So it's good to hear that actually, you're kind of now maybe making the WBS code, evolving it to the next level. But what we found was that we could keep their existing WBS system, but we can add extra columns of data against, or basic attributed data against those line items to add in CWP code, the EWP code, and not so much, I haven't played too much with the PWP, but those two key codes. And if they've done it, if they've set the nomenclature correctly, then IWPs will fall out that CWP, because there should be a parent-child relationship. So, and where we've seen that done correctly, then I think we've seen efficiencies with automation, because the tools then can start mapping that together between if that code is also appearing in the 3D model and the schedule, so we can do proper 4D planning. And certainly that is one of our key elements that as in a feed, we would like to see those two elements mapped in the model and in the schedule, so we can auto map it. And it starts building this alternative coding structure to the tag number or to the requisition number or to the PO. That, as I said, there's this common currency between everything, and it's the AWP coding.
Perfect. Well, it is full time, and I have to say, everyone that joined us 45 minutes ago has hung out throughout this 45 minutes and is still here now. So I think that's a compliment to our panelists. I really appreciate the panelists, Antonio and Martin, taking the time to be here with us today and give us their expert perspectives. And again, we look forward to seeing you with the rest of your panelists at the conference on October 2nd and 3rd. Thank you to all the attendees for registering today. We will send you a link to the recording of this webinar. And yeah, we do encourage you to please go to awpconference.com, have a look at everything else that we've got lined up for you this year, and consider signing up and joining us in October for the conference. Any final comments, closing comments from the panelists before we shut it down? Maybe Antonio?
Just wanted to thank the participants and for their questions, and then thank you, ASI, for hosting this webinar. Absolutely.
Martin?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the participants, all 45 of you, for staying the call. Appreciate that, much appreciated. And Antonio, thanks for delivering such an expert responses, etc. That kind of ups my game a little bit, but it's great to be on the stage with an EPC that is delivering what we really want people to do, and for ASI to host it. Much appreciated.
Very welcome indeed. Thanks again. We will leave it at that, and have a great rest of your day to everyone online. Cheers.
Great. Okay, so thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.